Do you ever feel like your life is one long series of disappointments? Like nothing ever changes or nothing ever works out in your favor? Or maybe you just have a few birthday parties, but everything else is a rough mountain climb? Today's show is all about the moments we miss that make a difference. Let's go. Hey y'all, it's the Ep45 show. I'm Robert Kennedy III. Ep3, that's me. This is episode 45. I don't have a guest today, but I do have something I want to talk about with you. It's an important topic and one I believe that all of us really need to consider. Crossover moments. Yes, what are those? If I had my boys here with me, they would say it's one of those things in basketball where you break people's ankles. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm talking about? If you watch basketball, it's a movement with the basketball where you do something and people trip over their own feet and fall. That's not what we're talking about today. We're going to be talking about crossover moments. What are those moments where you make transitions and maybe you aren't even aware? Now, before we answer any questions, I want to hear your voice. I've had a few interesting voicemails recently, and I'll be sharing some of them on upcoming episodes, but I want to give you the opportunity to let your voice be heard also. So here's a question. What would you do first if you won $1 million? What would you do first if you won $1 million? Send your voicemail answer to me by going to robertkennedy3.com/voicemail. That's robertkennedy3.com/voicemail. Anyway, what you reading, Robert? Here's what I'm reading. I'm reading a book by one of my favorite authors, Steven Pressfield. It's called The Artist's Journey. And it's subtitled The Wake of the Hero's Journey and the Lifelong Pursuit of Meaning. Here's what Stephen says about the book. I have a theory about the hero's journey. We all have one. We have many, in fact. But our primary hero's journey is the passage we live out in real life before we find our calling. The hero's journey ends when, like Odysseus, we return home to Ithaca, to the place from which we started. What then? The passage that comes next is the artist's journey. On our artist's journey, we move past resistance and past self-sabotage. We discover our true selves and our authentic calling, and we produce the works we were born to create. You're an artist too, whether you realize it or not, whether you like it or not, and you have an artist's journey. Will you live it out? Will you follow your muse and do the work you were born to do? That's it. Grab this book, The Artist's Journey. As always, it's in the show notes. Click the link there and it'll lead you right to the place you need to go. Okay, let's jump into today's episode. Today, I want to talk about crossover moments. What's a crossover moment, you ask? Well, let me start out with a reference. Quite a few years ago, I was watching this movie called Baby Geniuses. If you haven't watched it, you can check it out on Netflix or Amazon Prime. As a matter of fact, I'm going to put a link in the show notes so you can watch it. Anywho, the plot of the movie was that babies speak in a language all their own and they understand each other up to the age of 2 years old. It was a comedy, and the joke really was that the adults in the movie had these plans and babies always seem to have a way to foil the adults' plans. Okay? The adults we speak of are two villainous researchers who have figured out that babies come into the world possessing valuable universal knowledge, and then they share it with each other using a language only they can understand. Once they get to 2 years old, though, they lose the language. They cross over, and all of the universal secrets are lost. Now, I know what you're thinking. Who on earth would make this movie, and why would I watch it, Robert? I know. As a matter of fact, film critic Roger Ebert at the time said, Bad films are easy to make, but a film as unpleasant as Baby Geniuses achieves a kind of grandeur. Wow. Ouch. Anyway, that's not really what this show today is about. What I really want to point out from the movie is that there are crossover moments that really make a difference in your life when you recognize them and when you look back at them. In the movie, the babies had a certain knowledge, a certain purpose, a certain way of being, and then at a certain time, they crossed over into something else. I remember quite a few years ago when I was making the decision to enter a new phase in my business. I had an online learning company, and I was looking to take it to a new level, to grow it that year. Now, things started off great, good, getting really good contracts, getting a lot of contacts, just making a lot of things happen. But by the end of the year, I had made some colossal mistakes. I mean, huge. Y-U-U-G-E. I made some huge mistakes. The kind that left me in a tremendous financial hole. I mean, tens of thousands of dollars. I created a real mess. It was, to make things more challenging, I had a family, 3 kids under the age of 10 going to church schools where tuition was expected to be paid. Right? And cars, home, and oh yeah, we needed food. I made a mess, and to be honest, I couldn't see any bright lights ahead. I couldn't see any way that my story was going to turn out well. I couldn't see how any happy moments could ever be possible again. I went to see some of my mentors, and they couldn't dig me out of the hole. I mean, they gave me advice, but the hole was still there, and it was getting deeper and deeper, and I didn't know what to do. They told me things, but I think a part of me just wanted them to give me the money to get out of it. Right? But of course, none of them could do that, or maybe they could have, but it would not have been advantageous for them to do that for me. I couldn't say that at the time, but looking back, I know that was the best thing. But guess what? This was a crossover moment. You know them. It's the moment where you need to make a decision. You either do something or nothing. You live or you die. You go all in or you suffer. You just know you can't stay where you are. Now, here's the thing about crossover moments. You recognize them when you look in the rearview mirror, but not so much when you're in the middle of it. And in the midst of the moment, it doesn't seem short. But when you look back, you realize that it wasn't as long as you thought. So what do you do when you are approaching a moment that you don't even recognize is coming or that you're in? And that's just the thing. We don't recognize the moments. We don't see them coming, but we're in them, and all of us are in them. So I want to share a few things about those moments, things that you can do, things that'll help you navigate those crossover moments. Here's one. The first thing is recognize that everyone has these moments. I'll say that again. Recognize that everyone, no exceptions, everyone has these moments. They're like tests. Some people pass them, some people fail them, and others defer them, hoping that they will have a better answer the next time. See, the hard part about crossover moments is that they can feel lonely. They can feel like you're the only one in the world who will ever experience them and is experiencing them right at that moment. They can feel like if anyone finds out, you'll be so embarrassed that you might as well move to another planet. But this is the test you've got to pass through. It's like being in a desert and seeing a mirage. You'll see the mirage, recognize it isn't real, and then you've got to flip your mindset to keep moving. Everything you are experiencing right now has been experienced by someone else, and the majority of them made it through. So the reality is that you've got a pretty good chance of making it through.
Communication, motivation, leadership, and more. You're listening to the RK3 Show.
This leads me to my next point. Number 2, recognize that your speed of exit won't be the same as anyone else's. Recognize that your speed of exit from this moment won't be the same as anyone else's. Everyone is on this journey. And the amazing thing about our world is that with 7 billion plus people, you have 7 billion stories, and none of them is exactly the same or going at the same speed. Your story is unique. Your journey isn't like anyone else's, and you may be in a moment longer than someone else who has or who was in a similar moment. But you might also be in it for a shorter time than you think. You've also got to remember that your moment is a template for someone else. Yeah. The way that you handle your moment gives someone else a clue about how they can handle theirs. I think about it like driving. My daughter just got her learner's permit recently, and she'll learn how to drive. As a matter of fact, I'm giving her lessons and teaching her how to drive. She gets to drive to some different places with me. And her mom would prefer that I be the one in the front because she gets a little bit nervous about being in the front seat while her daughter's learning how to drive. Now, in addition to what I've taught her, she'll go to a driving school to complete her requirements for getting her license. But really, a lot of her education has come from how she has seen me handle situations on the road. She'll respond to certain situations with calm because she's seen me respond that way. Now, if I was a road ragey type of person, she would respond in that way. Chances are that she would respond in that way because that's what she's seen. You might be saying, yeah, that's your daughter, though. She's around you, genetics, all of that. That's what's supposed to happen. I'll give you another story. Shortly after graduating from college, I had bought my first car, and it was a stick shift. Yeah. Now, driving a stick shift just automatically puts you in another category, right? It's like now you're a real driver because you can drive a standard. Anyway, a friend of mine wanted to drive my car one day. She gets into the driver's seat and I go into the passenger seat. And as she pulls off from the curb, she motioned to where her hands were on the steering wheel and the gear shift. I looked and I said, okay, I don't get it. She said, look at how I'm holding my hands. Still a little bit confused. I said, so what should I be looking at? So she huffs and she's like, fine, I just wanted you to see that I steer and hold the gear shift just like you do. Now I could feel my eyebrows positioning themselves into question mode. Like, why would you even notice something like that? The point isn't why people notice what you do. It's just that they do. And you never know who is looking, paying attention, or emulating. They emulate the good, the bad, and even the mundane. Someone's watching your story and how you drive while you're in it, as well as how you exit. So comparing yourself or comparing your story and looking to exit your story at the same pace or the same speed as someone else doesn't really work. So don't rush the process. Don't skip through it. Don't ask the question, why am I taking this long? Because your journey is a template for someone else, and it may just be what they need in order to help them navigate their own journey. The third thing I want you to know is celebrate the crossovers. You'll look back at your life and you'll see some distinct time periods. You'll recognize moments where you doubted yourself. You'll remember moments where you felt confused. You'll remember moments where you allowed yourself to be controlled by what others thought. And you'll recognize moments where you made some different decisions. Now, some of those moments will coincide with specific time frames in your life or birthdays. Some will be random. But for me, I recognized one of those crossover moments happened when I turned 40. I felt like I started to think a bit more globally and differently. I recognized that I had wasted a lot of time giving space to the opinions of others I recognized that I'd given away precious minutes and hours because I wanted to make other people happy, and I didn't give enough attention or belief to my own dreams. 40 was a crossover moment. I had to recognize it and celebrate it. Some people may celebrate that with a party. Some people may celebrate that by going out to dinner or going to a movie or doing something special for yourself. However you have to do it, recognize it and celebrate it. Sometimes you'll have moments of clarity, and those are important times in your life. The question is, what will you do to rubber stamp that moment? What will you do to remember it? I want you to think about those moments as markers and milestones. How will you plant a flag at that particular moment to make sure that you can look back and remember it? You can celebrate it by writing it. You can celebrate it by recording it. You can celebrate it by capturing it. You can celebrate it by taking a picture of it. Whatever you got to do to celebrate those crossovers and remember those moments, do it. But one of the most important things that you can do to celebrate it is by telling it. I could go on and on and on about crossover moments. They're precious moments that shouldn't be ignored. I'll repeat the three things that we've said. Number one, recognize that everyone has those moments. Don't freak out about the moments because you're not on your own. You're not by yourself. Number two, recognize the speed of your exit won't be the same as anyone else's. And then number three, celebrate the crossovers. Today's episode is really about encouraging you to recognize those moments and treat them as special. Don't take them for granted. Decide that you will take some time now to look back at your crossover moments and decide to do something with them. Then be on the lookout for your next crossover moment, which I'm telling you is sure to come. That's all for today, people. You know what to do. Email me. Send me a message at podcast@robertkennedy3.com. That's podcast@robertkennedy3.com. I want to hear your thoughts and answer your questions. Or you can leave me a voicemail at robertkennedy3.com/voicemail. That's robertkennedy3.com/voicemail. Also, don't forget to support us on Patreon by going to patreon.com/the RK3 Show, patreon.com/the RK3 Show. And don't forget to visit me over in the Speak Right Now community on Facebook. That's Speak Right, as in WRITE, the Speak Right Now community on Facebook. You can hang out with me on Instagram. I'm Robert Kennedy 3 there. Holla at your boy. Guess what, everybody? Everything that happens to you in life is your stuff. Your stuff is your story, and your story deserves a stage. I'm Robert Kennedy III, and you've been listening to The RK